And I want to just start by welcoming everybody to the first meeting of 2022, at least the first meeting of the Africa Asia Committee and Forum. To all of our board members, our guests, our staff, our friends. This is our very first, and yes, we were hoping to be in person, but we'll have to be a little bit more patient. Many of you have heard me talk about why Asia Africa is such an exciting region, especially for me. We are the smallest in budget, but we are vast in our reach. We are emblematic of what JDC does, and we're such a diverse region that it just speaks to what JDC is all about. And in many ways, this diversity and this vast reach is the driving force behind today's meeting. So, as you know, across the region, we have ancient communities, almost remnant communities, that have been in existence for thousands of years. We have newly emerging communities in parts of the world that are just beginning to show their journey as a Jewish community and part of the global world. We've got vulnerable communities, many of them living among hostile Arab and Muslim majorities, and we have communities that are lucky enough to live in a region of more tolerance. We've got part of our region that communities have terrible problems of hunger and poverty. Part of our region has a good self-sufficiency and is able not only to take care of their own, but is able to reach out and take care of others as well. And that's what Asia Africa is all about. So today we're going to meet three representatives and stories from three very different communities that are represented by this kind of diversity. Each of them beautiful in its own way and with its own unique story. And each of them has a central engagement with us at JDC. You know that our team on Asia Africa is really quite small, as in can fit in. Do you remember what a phone booth looked like? Right. But we're all over the place, and we are busy doing the work on behalf of JDC for so many of you. The needs and expectations of us in this region, however, are very high. And when people tell the story of JDC, whether it's for fundraising or just to talk about the amazing diversity of the Jewish world, it's the communities of Asia and Africa that are often highlighted. I want to just remind you all that if you have questions that come up during the discussion today, please put them in the chat and we'll do our very best to get them answered. We'll get that monitored as we go along. So today we're going to hear about our work in Dubai, probably our newest and most intriguing place under the leadership of JDC Entwine. And we are going to talk through our more traditional work in Turkey, which has been part of our heart and soul for many, many years. And then we're going to start with what's going on in Australia, which has a unique and wonderful history of its own. And JDC Australia is going to be represented and explained by our very own board member, Eva Fischel, who is JDC Australia. And I must say, I would be remiss if I did not announce to the entire world that it is 4 a.m. in Australia, where Eva is, and she gets extra points for wanting to do this live as opposed to pre-recorded. So Eva, you have been a wonderful inspiration and a friend to so many of us. I'd really like you to begin and talk to us and engage us a little bit in your world, in what JDC Australia is like and what we can look forward to.
Well, thank you very much for that lovely warm introduction, Betsy. It's a pleasure to haven't seen you all for such a long time, and even though we're meeting virtually, it's lovely. It's a long time that we last connected, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to do so. Since I knew I was going to present, I have been reflecting on the beauty and importance of a global community. It shows us that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. It shows us that we are not alone, and that even if we may not know sometimes the names of our counterparts, we are undeniably connected. As Ralph Goldman used to say, who was my hero, we are intertwined and interconnected. We share common values and a common destiny. This is what has made the Jewish people special for thousands of years, and this is what lies at the heart of our organisation, JDC, or as the Joint. We call it in Australia just the Joint. I believe there are only two people from Australia on the international board. Helen Abelis, who lives in Melbourne, and myself, I live in Sydney. Helen is not on our board in Australia, but we speak often on the phone. There tended to be, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why at the time, that the people who came from Poland went to live in Melbourne, and more Hungarian people came to live in Sydney. So just a little bit about myself for perspective. I was born into the horror of the Holocaust in 1944 in Hungary, which was the worst time in the world to be born. My parents were taken away to the camps. My mother survived Auschwitz and my father perished in Auschwitz. In 1948, we escaped the communist regime. As my mother always said, after what she had endured, there was no way she was going to live under a totalitarian regime. And we escaped illegally, which where my memory begins, where they were shooting people. And if they did catch you escaping, we crossed the border from Budapest to Austria, where after a 2-year stay in Vienna, we were assisted by the Joint to come here to these distant shores. My mother had in fact applied first to the United States, then to Canada, and actually Australia was the third choice, but it was Australia who received us. At the time, the Australian Jewish Welfare Society, that actually had been helped by JDC, was the premier organisation. That same organisation, Welfare Society, was later called Jewish Care Australia. I was involved with it for 20 years, 15 years as its president, which was a huge honour for me, and I was very humbled to do so. In a relatively short time, I'm jumping a lot of time here, but in a relatively short time, the Australian Jewish community evolved to be the envy of other nations. We have arguably the best Jewish community infrastructure in the world, with dozens and dozens of thriving congregations to keep us connected to our spiritual core, Jewish museums to preserve our past, Jewish care to take care of our vulnerable, state-of-the-art aged care for our elderly, and a Jewish school system and informal Jewish education program that guarantees Jewish continuity in a way that our grandparents could only have dreamed about. In fact, we've had a lot of visitors, one of them being Dershowitz, who was just blown away when we took him to some of our Jewish day schools. So as I stated before, the Jewish populations reside mainly in Melbourne and Sydney, but despite our small numbers, we punch way above our weight when it comes to support for Israel. Not just with financial support for Israel, which is quite amazing, but a commitment to Israel's well-being that goes well beyond money. And we have per capita, I believe, the highest rate of aliyah in the world. I can personally attest to that, as one of our children live in Israel working as a doctor. So that's our contribution to Israel. I was and am very well aware that it wasn't like this by accident, that somebody cared enough to scour the wreckages of post-Holocaust Europe, gather up terrified and displaced people, and chartered the suitable transport to get them here. After I had been on the international board for a couple of years, I realised that JDC had left Australia because we had become this successful, self-sustaining community, and very morally correctly, JDC leaves when that is the case to go and work where they are more needed. Sadly for us, they barely left a footprint. However, I always felt that we owed it to JDC to re-establish the connection and also to give an opportunity for those who not only wanted to repay, but who felt that, as in the Talmud, we are told, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh, which says Jews are not just responsible for one another, but we are actually obligated to one another. So I decided to take on this challenge. Over the last few years, I have tried to establish the joint here and have been using various tools to enhance the effort. We have had many speaker tours whereby top professionals like Asher Ostrom, Dr. William Rukant, Amir Shaviv, Russell Walken, David Zakon have all come to Australia and have spoken, and we were delighted to have them, and they were very successful and very well received. We have had several international missions to the former Soviet Union, India, Morocco, Cuba, Greece, and I certainly hope that life after COVID, which I would love to see, that we can resume that once again. We have tried to interest our youth in Entwine, and in fact have a couple of alumni here, with one of them actually getting the Ralph Goldman Award. We hope to formally launch the Entwine program in 2 years, and I will discuss that with you at another time. We have had successful partnerships with other Jewish organisations, notably JNF, WheatSow, and we've had some hugely successful functions. I think maybe you call them galas. And very luckily, because as you all know, we live in a COVID world, we've managed to have 2 live functions in between all our lockdowns this year, one in April in Melbourne, and the last one we were just lucky enough to hold in person on the 1st of December, where we had a wonderful evening. We featured the star of the Phantom of the Opera, who actually landed the role in London's West End till it had to close due to COVID. He lives in Australia. His father actually was helped by the joint. He's got a brilliant voice. He was booked at the Opera House, so he was absolutely amazing. We've had quite a few videos showing the work of joint that we show at these galas. And at the function, we virtually connected to Argentina, where the head of JDC Latin America gave us the information about life there and how JDC supports its work. As we have in Australia adopted the time of Hanukkah, the Festival of Light, we annually have had a beautiful box of Hanukkah candles made, and we distribute them to schools, synagogues, and donors. We don't actually have enough to distribute to as many people as I would like to, as I'm looking for a sponsor, which I haven't yet found. I, of course, am always mindful of our expenditure. But we try to reinforce that we are the organisation that brings light into the lives of many whose world would otherwise be dark and bleak. I sincerely hope that every year our efforts will bear more fruit, and that every year we shall increase our numbers, both as followers of joint via knowledge, which will manifest in increased donations to our mission. Thank you for listening, and if anyone has any questions.
Okay. So Eva, for the few people that that joined a few minutes late, first, a big thank you to you. And secondly, could you just recap a bit the size of the Australian Jewish community? I know that you stressed that it had a very sophisticated infrastructure, caring for the elderly, for children, day schools, and so forth. And if you could just give a couple of the highlights about the community for those who just joined, starting with the population.
The Jewish population, it varies. I think it is about 120,000, between 100 and 120,000. The largest populations are Melbourne and Sydney, although we have got Perth, Queensland, but the largest reside definitely in Melbourne and Sydney. Basically, the population is made up of European migration, although we have had quite significant migration from the former Soviet Union, nearly all helped by JDC. And we've had a significant population growth from South Africa that's been a wonderful injection into our community. And I believe per capita, after Israel, we have the highest population of Holocaust survivors in the world, living per capita in Australia. What else did you, as I said before, we do have a very sophisticated infrastructure, and even though our population is minuscule, of course, compared to the States, but I can tell you we're very highly represented. I don't think a Jewish organisation exists on this universe that is not represented here, which makes it more difficult to fundraise, because every university in Israel and every hospital in Israel, there probably isn't a Jewish organisation that is not represented here. And so it's quite diverse, and it's a very Zionistic. We stand very strongly with Israel, very Zionistically focused organisation. I also mentioned per capita, I believe we have the highest rate of Aliyah in the world as well, because we used to have, I'm not quite sure that's the case today, but we used to have close to 60% of our youth attending full-time Jewish day school, and that's quite huge. And we also have a wonderful system whereby if you don't attend Jewish day school, you also get Jewish education, and all the summer camps and all the Jewish schools organise frequent trips to Israel. So it's very Israel focused.
Wow. Well, this is phenomenal, a story that many of us do not know about, and we're grateful to you for bringing the Australian Jewish community into the joint family, and hope that they'll also share our interest in other regions around the world. But you've done a great job of connecting your community with JDC, you and your professional, Brett Kay, whom we also thank. And I hope that when the time comes and we're able to travel again, we can put Australia back on our list of must-sees, and we can visit and see for ourselves. So thank you very much, Eva. And
Thank
as you
you.
can see in the chat, lots of people say thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to Turkey, one of my favorite countries too. And our Vice Chair, Terry Smook, is going to introduce this part of the program about an incredible country that has been part of JDC's work and heart for many, many years. Terry?
Hi, thanks, Betsy. I'm honored to be able to introduce our second community in the forum today, and moving away from Australia, which is doing some extraordinary things. We're going to a completely different community, that's Turkey. So the Turkish Jewish community is really at the heart of what we do here at JDC. It's the heart of our work in Africa, Asia. And it represents a long-term partnership. And the work is made up of so much of the traditional JDC programming and the programming we all know so well, and we're connected to, and we're committed to. And we support the welfare of the community, developing community programs, training leadership, creating partnerships with the local community. Some years ago, when I visited Turkey, had an opportunity to visit with the Jewish community, but one experience really has stayed with me. We went to see the Great Synagogue, and we needed to make an appointment, surrender our passports, have all kinds of security checks, and we went into the synagogue. And joining us was our guide, who was a young Muslim woman, and she had never been in a synagogue before. So we went in, and it was truly remarkable. For those of you who have not had this experience, I highly endorse it. There were ghostly images on the wall that came from the bombing that took place inside the synagogue. And
3 times.
Excuse me?
3 times.
Yes. And it connects us to the past, it connects us to the present, what our community was living through. Turkey was a haven for Jews for so many years until it changed. And then it became a haven again. And then there was bombing. And JDC is there. JDC is there to take care of the people. And this image, those ghostly images will never, ever leave my head. But better than ghostly images, we're building life again. And that's why I'm really happy to be able to celebrate what we do and talk about it. So the context of Turkey is not a simple one, and we're going to learn more about that now and about the work that we do. And I am proud to introduce Sam Amiel, who is JDC's country director for Turkey, and Adi, and I hope I pronounced it correctly, Angel, who's a member of the Jewish Community Leadership, and he is chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And in his spare time, he's CEO of a software company, which is called ProMakes. Also a husband, also a father. Okay, so you are a Superman, and thank you for joining us today. Sam?
Sam,
And
you start.
Adil, go ahead. Adil, go ahead, yours.
Okay. All right, Terry, thank you very much for the introduction. It's my second time to make a presentation of my community in JDC. The first one was face-to-face in New York back in 2015. Mm-hmm. And I hope next one will be again face-to-face and we'll be able to hug each other again. And thank you, Sam, to give me, to letting me to presenting my community again to this wonderful audience. So I have 8 minutes, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. And I'll try to present our community and to give you a brief information about that. Let's see, okay. So the population is about 17,000. Some people believe that it's a bit less today. Most of it living in Istanbul, about 15,000 people in Istanbul, 1,000 in Izmir. So all the rest in 5, 6, 7 cities, small cities. Again, big cities, but small community in each one of them. But I'm going to explain you more the situation in Istanbul and a little bit in Izmir. Unfortunately, it's an aging community like many other communities that we have. And if you see the population, the percentage of population between 0 to 24 years is only 20% in our community, while in the country is 50%. So we are an old people. Jews doesn't want to make too many children. Some youngsters are leaving. So we are an aging population. People still call me young. So think about that. The structure of the community against all the communities in the West, especially in the US, we don't have congregations. It's not very Jewish, because we have only one voice, one chief rabbi, Everything is under his umbrella. We have one community president. Everybody reports to him. And we have the Bet Din, who is taking care about the religious issues, the Council of Representatives that the chief rabbi appoints. And we have an executive board, which I'm member of it, of 14 people who are kind of managing all the non-religious issues. Oops, what is this? Doesn't move. Wait a second, sorry for that. Okay, I'm going to talk about the institutions that we have. Youth clubs, we have 2 in Istanbul, 1 in each side, 1 on the European side, 1 on the Asian side. I hope most of you know Istanbul, that it's in the middle of 2 continents. And we have another one in Izmir. So 2 youth clubs. Actually, in the last 2 years, because of COVID, they are not very active, but we're still keeping them. We have our own buildings, and they are serving all the community. 3 young clubs for 17,000 people. Synagogues in Istanbul, we have 19 active synagogues. We have many others which are not active. 3 of them are on the Princess Islands, for those who know Istanbul, and they are operating only during summer. Not all the synagogues are active day by day. Day by day, in the non-COVID time, it's about 5 to 6 that they are opening. They are open every day, and all the others on Shabbats and the high holidays only. 19 synagogues in Istanbul, many others in Izmir. I put here the pictures of 2 synagogues. I put the Ashkenazi one because there are a lot of Ashkenazis, but if you compare it with our community, they are only 4%, 96% we are Sfaradim. But again, you know, they have their own synagogue, but again, they are under the same umbrella of the chief rabbi. They don't have a chief rabbi. There is only one chief rabbi for the whole country. And on the right side, you see the ancient, you know, the oldest active synagogue in Istanbul. It's a 520 years old synagogue, Akhrida. And if you ever come to Istanbul next time, instead of visiting the ceremonial synagogue, Neve Shalom, it's better for you to go to this one. It's not open every day. You need to present your passports. It's difficult, but it's worth. We have a Jewish hospital. It's a 107 years in service. It's not serving only the Jews, but you know, all the needy people, the Jewish, you know, we have a special agreement with the hospital management, so we send them to our hospital, and it is still active. Old age home. I will leave a little bit, you know, some space to my good friend Sam to talk about it, because we have around 95 members of our community who live there. It's a wonderful place. It's a difficult place to maintain, but with the help of the world, we are maintaining it. Social support Yad. It's an umbrella organization where we are organizing all the support, all the social support, food packages, clothing, all the needy people. In my next slide, you have numbers. Don't go and try to read them. You know, Sam can share with all the relevant people the numbers, and Sam is very aware about it. This umbrella organization, we recently, in the last 3 years, we established, is helping to anyone that may need help, and we are touching every needy member of the community in the whole Istanbul, as well as Izmir, with the help of the Izmir community, of course. We have one school only in the whole country. It's in Istanbul. We have about 640 students, which represents approximately 40% of the population of that age. It's from kindergarten to 12, K-12. And we are, the education is in Turkish, English, and Hebrew together. Again, it's 1/3 of the students, they need scholarships. And the same organization, Yad, is helping us in order to collect all the necessary funds in order to cover the needs of the Jewish school. We have all the necessary informal Jewish education, Talmud Torah, bar and bat mitzvah clubs, pre-marriage education. Everything is organized by one committee, which is under the same leadership of the chief rabbi. We have one newspaper weekly. It's called Shalom. It's more than 70 years that appears, and we have one page every week in Ladino, which is the Jewish Spanish for those who are aware. And we try to keep this language alive with this newspaper. And this is my last slide. We have a museum of our Turkish Jews, which is situated in the same complex of Neve Shalom Synagogue, the same synagogue Terry just mentioned, which was bombed 3 times in the last 30 years, unfortunately. But this is our largest synagogue and the ceremonial one, where we have our museum. This was my last slide, and I finished my 8 minutes. But if you allow me 1 more minute, I want to mention a visit which was very important 2 weeks ago, of an organization called ARIS. Maybe in the next session, when you will hear Dubai, maybe they will mention also this organization ARIS, which stands for Alliance of Rabbis in the Islamic Countries. More than 35 rabbis, they gathered in Turkey, in Istanbul, 2 weeks ago. And the president of the country, Erdogan, invited them to meet him in Ankara. And because there were no enough time to do that, he sent a special airplane to pick them up and to bring them back. So maybe you can read the story of this visit. If there will be questions, I will be happy to answer. But it was a historic visit where the president made a very, very good speech and mentioned his a little bit better relations with the new administration of Israel. And he mentioned the names of President Herzog and Prime Minister Bennett. And we find it very valuable. And here, with your permission, I want to stop and leave room to the questions if you may have, or Sam, if he wants to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. Maybe I will just highlight a few things for my friends in terms of some examples, concrete examples of what reflects the long partnership that the Joint has had with the community in Turkey. I think it's very easy for a lot of us at the Joint to think about the telegram and the cable which was sent, and we see it in the office in New York, but a lot of us sometimes forget that where it was sent from. So our roots go way back in Turkey. And when you tour the infrastructure and you make visits in the community, you still see the Joint's name on marble plaques in the basements, at the foundations of many of the organizations that are there as part of the massive infrastructure. But as Adil rightly pointed out, this is a community which has its ups and has its downs, and currently it's in demographic decline, quite steady demographic decline, I'd say, for the last several decades. So when a lot of us in the Joint think about Jewish renewal, or we think about growing Jewish life, a lot of us in Asia, Africa also think about how to condense or how to shrink in a way to fit Jewish life based on numbers. And I think if we think about Turkey, that's a community that had a population probably at its peak where Australia is right now, 120, well over 100,000 people. Today, they are, for lack of a better term, a shadow, let's say, of what that was once, and shrinking. And so we as an organization aim to help the community. We really look for those weak spots, those painful spots. And as the community ages, we focus very heavily on services for the elderly. Just in the last few years alone, we have helped them meld, really join together 2 large Jewish community old age homes into one, at the same time upgrade the services and train the staff. We've helped the community start and pilot a day center. While there was mostly institutional care for the elderly in the community for many, many years, based out of the hospital, with the size and the growth of the city, we've now worked with the community to provide in-home care, very similar to what we do around the world with other places. At the same time, helping them transition from food packages being delivered to meal cards. So we really take a lot of the know-how that we have globally, and we help to instill it culturally appropriate for whatever works for the Jewish community. We've had wonderful postings with Entwine Jewish Service Corps Fellows in Izmir for more than a dozen years, also in Istanbul as well. And I think about 15 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, those who we all remember, Ami Bergman, may he rest in peace,
Yes.
was essential and really integral in working with the community and together with, I believe, was the Weinberg Foundation at the time, to address the issue of only about 20% of the Jewish community children attending the Jewish day school, compared to the 60% that Ava mentioned in Australia. We then, Ami at the time, then worked with the community and the Weinberg Foundation to infuse money to create a substantial scholarship fund, which exists today. And the numbers in terms of representation of the kids at the school is upwards of 30 to 40% now. It's always a struggle. It's always a struggle, but the numbers are much better. And so, depending on really what the issues are of the time, of the decade, and I think in Turkey probably of the year, for those of you following the news, the country is in more or less economic freefall. The Turkish lira was voted the most devalued currency of 2021. We don't know where that's going to go. Adil didn't mention it, but when I was in Turkey just a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the conversations were about how will the community basically address a lot of the financial needs that are appearing in the community, in the institutions, in people's homes. And we, the Joint, are responding with COVID humanitarian fund assistance to individual homes, to some of these newly poor. And this is critical assistance. We wish we could do more. We do want to do more. And we hopefully will do more in the coming year. But the partnership is extremely intimate. It is, as Betsy says, at the heart and soul of what we do in the region. So thank you, Adil, for making your presentation, and thank you all for listening.
Okay. Questions? Yeah, Nancy, do you want to unmute yourself? Nancy Hackerman?
Something.
I got it.
That's
Two quick things. The last time I was in Istanbul, maybe it was 6 to 8 years ago, and there was a big concern about the presence of the Muslim community and whether they were going to be more radicalized or not. So I kind of want to know where that stands. And also, just to let you know that Jews are the same everywhere, I went to see the synagogue. It was surrounded by tanks. I didn't make an appointment early. I walked to the back door. I said, I'd like to go sit in services. No, you have to have this, you have to do that, you have to do this from 10 years ago and whatever. And I said, well, can I make a contribution? Sure, come on in. So that's how I got into the show.
It depends on the size of the donation.
No, I didn't even tell him.
Anyhow, I mean, the volunteers who are guarding, thanks to them, our institutions, they are entitled to accept or not anyone. You know, they have this this samkhut to do so. So you know, it's good that you managed to convince them.
Well,
So
I also once I got in, I said, oh, by the way, I'm on the board of the JDC. Oh, for God's sakes, come on in, you know.
Yeah, all right, good.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, about your first comment or question, you were in Istanbul 6 to 8 years ago. It's the same government, it's the same administration, and we know how to live with it. Actually, you know, I must mention that from the religious rights or religious freedom, we are far better than some previous administrations that you don't know, you know, maybe 20, 40 or 60 years ago. But again, you know, the problem arises when there is a problem in the Middle East, unfortunately. And in the last 10, 12 years, we managed to understand how to cope with it. And that's why we try to find a solution, not solutions, but ways to mend the ties between the two countries. You know, once the two countries will be more in a more silent situation, so we won't have any problem in this country.
I'll only add in terms of from a day-to-day community standpoint, and also when we look at budgets of communities, there are few communities around the world, when you look at their budget expenditures and you look at the top three, very few have security as number one.
Oh,
And that's the case in Turkey. And that's something that I think we need to consider when we leverage our funding and where do we focus it. And oftentimes when we think about communities in the Eastern Europe or in FSU, we say people are thinking about food or they're thinking about sending their kid to a school or medicine. Here we're talking about first securing premises, securing the community. And that oftentimes means barring tourists or taking precautions. I myself always have my passport on me. These security guys know me for the last 6-7 years, but they don't necessarily leave me, let me in with a green light. So I think that's an important piece for us to consider. Jonathan, you mentioned a question about Chabad. Chabad has been in Turkey for many, many years. They have a Rabbi Mendy Chitrich who's there. He is one of the leaders, if not the leader, of the Islamic Alliance of Rabbis that Adil mentioned that did get invited to the president's palace for the visit. He has a wonderful relationship, is not part of the Beit Din, as Adil mentioned, but he also plays an integral role in terms of providing a kashrut supervision for the meals that are provided for Turkish Airlines, which is a massive source of income for the community. They've given him a seat in the beautiful Ashkenazi
that's correct.
synagogue.
But let me correct you, Sam. Let me correct you.
Please.
We don't have Chabad in Turkey. We have a Chabad rabbi in Turkey, but Chabad doesn't exist. They don't have their synagogue. They don't have. I mean, and he's working again under the same umbrella of our chief rabbi Yitzhak Haleva.
Right, exactly right. And to your point, Jonathan, he does do wonderful work and does attract many people to Judaism, to religious life, to the community, and he plays a wonderful role. And I know him personally as well. So I think there's no purposeful omission there, but he's a great part of the community and an asset.
Correct.
Merav, we have time for one quick
Yes, thank you.
question or comment before we turn to Dubai.
Okay.
Thank you, Betsy. Adil, thank you very much. It was very, very interesting. I wanted to ask you, is there an increase in the last 2 years in anti-Semitism as we see in other places in the world? Is there a change?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that because we had by far worse times than the last 2 years. By far, I can, a short answer to you. My answer is definitely not. There is no raise. There is the actual one still there. But frankly speaking, in the last 10, 12 years, we had by far worse times than that. By far worse times than that.
All right. Well, Turkey is one of those communities, very vulnerable in many ways, very strong in many ways. It's a place that many of us have visited, and that's on our list to get back. And Sam, I'm so glad you're able to get back there. I think with all of the countries that we serve, the lack of visitors has been very hard. And I'm sure that your presence there was very welcome. And now we turn to Dubai, to United Arab Emirates. You all know that since the Abraham Accords, there has been not just a little bit of warmth, but a heat emanating from the relationships between the Emirates and Israel, and the opening of doors for people to visit, and in particular the blossoming of the Jewish community, which has been there sort of quietly for a while, doing business and so forth, but now is really thriving. I am thrilled to tell you that every Friday when I can, I join the Kabbalat Shabbat call with the community of the entire region. We have people from Bahrain, from Oman as well, and it's really a growing and very exciting place to be right now. And in Africa, Asia, we're just thrilled that we can work so closely with Entwine, whose commitment to the community and whose fellows, whether they be year-long fellows or Ralph Goldman sort of shorter visits, they've been a real catalyst for change for the Jews who are living in this region. And so I'm thrilled to welcome Jake Berger, who's the JDC Entwine Global Jewish Service Corps Fellow right now. He's based in Dubai, and Jeanette Axelrod, who is the Senior Operations Manager for JDC Entwine, so that this intriguing part of the world can become a little more familiar, a little less mysterious. I turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Betsy, and thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to be here with you to present about our work. Quick little correction, I'm Entwine's Director of Global Programs. This is a new role which I'm stepping into, which is very exciting. And I've been with JDC for 9 years and have worked on all of our programs all over the world. So, you know, Dubai is a really special and exciting place that I've had the opportunity to travel to and work closely with Jake, who I'll let introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Berger, and I'm currently the JDC Entwine Fellow here in the Jewish community in the UAE. This is actually my second time as an Entwine Fellow, as 4 years ago, I was serving the Jewish community in Helsinki, Finland for a year, but clearly the weather isn't putting me off either side of the extreme when it comes to serving Jewish communities. And I'll just say very quickly before I hand back to Jeanette that it was very special to follow Adil and Sam talking about the Turkish Jewish community, because my first touch point with JDC Entwine was on a trip there at the start of 2017, and seeing pictures of the Akrida Synagogue where I visited was really beautiful. So it's like coming full circle.
Thanks, Jake. So I'll try to make my comments quick because I know we all want to hear from the person in the field who's actually doing the work. So I'll make sure to turn it over to Jake as soon as I can. So just for a bit of context, and I'm sure most of you know this, Entwine is the Young Adult Engagement Initiative of JDC, and our mission is to catalyze the current generation of Jewish young adults, whether in North America or other places around the world, to view global Jewish awareness, connection, and responsibility to core to who they are. And we do this in a number of ways and focus on 3 key areas. The first is service. So international and domestic programs to immerse young people and get face-to-face with the work that JDC does. And engagement through local programming in the US that enables alumni to continue their education and continue taking action on behalf of global Jewish causes. And finally, leadership programs, which use Entwine's value-based approach to train cohorts of Jewish leaders and give them the knowledge they need to become Jewish leaders, you know, as they continue on into their careers and carry with them that care for global Jewish causes and JDC's work around the world. The Jewish Service Corps, which we're going to focus on today, is one of Entwine's key service programs. And this program really offers young people an opportunity to directly engage in a meaningful way in JDC's global mission while actively fulfilling their value of global Jewish responsibility and really acting that out in the field while using their professional skills and experience. And what's really special about the Jewish Service Corps program is it's tailored in each of the locations that we place fellows in to the specific needs of the community. And we, you know, create these placements in collaboration with the local community, with JDC leadership, with regional directors and country directors to make sure that we're actually allowing these placements to fill a specific need that community has. So in Dubai, how does Entwine kind of lead as the serve as the lead interface for JDC in the region? Because it is a bit different than how JDC operates in other regions. And here in Dubai, we're able to fill specific needs that were identified by the Jewish community, have a presence on the ground in a community that, you know, JDC may not otherwise, or our funders may not otherwise see the need to. So by placing Jake and our previous fellows in the region, we're able to fulfill these goals and have a meaningful presence on the ground and connect JDC to this global Jewish community. So I think that's where I'll leave it. And I'd really like to turn it over to Jake to kind of talk about how this specifically looks in Dubai and his work on the ground. So Jake.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about a little brief history and where the community is at currently in terms of the stage of its development. It's changing all the time, so that's very exciting. And then after that couple of minutes, I'm going to talk specifically about my role and my placement and where I am focusing my efforts in working and looking forward to the future of the Jewish community here. So much has been said about the emergence of the Jewish community here in the UAE post-Abraham Accords. So the story is pretty well told. There's a lot of international spotlight on the community at the moment, lots of people always passing through, which makes it a very interesting place to be. And it's easy to forget with things so dynamic and actually quite a robust Jewish infrastructure here at the moment that even life here a couple of years ago was completely different. Initially, you speak to people who've been here in the Jewish community for a while, pre around 2013, when things started to get slightly more organized in terms of the Jewish community. People were still discovering what the UAE was. They were here for work, and they didn't know any other Jewish people. The community was initially organized around individuals meeting each other and meeting privately in people's homes and not really wanting to be publicly Jewish. And things changed around 2013, 2014, when the community became slightly more organized, away from the disorganization, and became from disorganized to unofficially organized. And the community was given permission by the authorities here to practice in an unofficial, clandestine manner in something that was known as the villa, which, if people have read up on the community, you might have heard about this. And this was essentially a home that was rented by the Jewish community that became the center for a lot of Jewish life. Post-Abraham Accords, and there's been a diversification of what's been going on in the community, and that villa life, those halcyon days that people still sort of refer back to, are no longer the case. And the community is a bit more complicated, and there's lots of different bits of infrastructure, which I'll briefly talk you through. The community is growing, diverse and dynamic. The size of the community depends on who you ask. People who've been here for a number of years will say anywhere between 10,000, between 1,000. And then if you ask the Chabad rabbi, they'll say between 5 and 10,000. And I'm not quite sure how he gets to that number, but what's definitely clear is that it's a growing community. And that's driven by two factors. One is the fact that people are now seeing Dubai as a place, and the UAE more widely as a destination where it's possible to be Jewish, and if they're offered jobs here, whereas in previous times they might have turned them down, they're now seeing that Jewish life is possible. So people are moving here all the time. And the other reason is that people who've been here for many years and haven't felt comfortable being outwardly Jewish or being involved in the community are becoming more involved in Jewish life, which is a very interesting phenomenon. So it's growing, it's diverse, and it's dynamic. People, there are Jews here from all over the world. Pretty much anywhere where there is a Jewish community, there is someone in the UAE who is from that place, and you're in a room in the community here and you hear a variety of languages spoken. And it's dynamic. The reason that people are allowed to be in this community is work. It's an expat community, and that means that the community is reasonably young. People here are family oriented, and they're here for jobs. So they've got a lot of energy, but they don't have a lot of capacity to put into Jewish infrastructure. In terms of religious infrastructure, there are several minyanim that meet across town for Shabbat. There is one daily minyan that Chabad runs as well in a more tourist area of town. In addition, there are 4 kosher restaurants here. I've been here 3 months, and in that time, 1 has opened, and next month, 1 more is opening. So it's clearly an area that's been identified as a growth opportunity for the community here, as well as 3 kosher caterers. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what my role specifically is about. 80% of my time is devoted to an institution called AMCL, Abraham Miracle Center for Learning, which is a sort of a new venture for cultural Jewish life in the city. And that's something that's been missing over the previous time that the community has been active. And that's been identified as a real area for growth and opportunity. The other 20% of my time is devoted to other community development opportunities. As Betsy said, I host a weekly call that brings together Jewish communities from across the Gulf region every Friday before Shabbat. And I also am involved in community-wide communications, etc. But now to talk a little bit about AMCL, I'm just going to share my screen. And this is a brand new Jewish community center that is opening in Dubai. And I'm very honored to be the manager of the center here. And I report to a lay leadership structure of our board. And I am essentially the professional for the center, and in some ways for the entire Jewish community, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end of my presentation. The vision for AMCL is that it's going to be a hub for ideas. It's going to be a place that people can engage intellectually with their Judaism, and that is something that doesn't really exist elsewhere in the city. It's going to be a center that's radically welcoming. It's going to be, as I said before, there are Jews here from all over the world, and it's our job to be welcoming as possible to all of those people from different denominational backgrounds, from different countries, speaking different languages. And it's also going to be a center for cultural exchange. And what we mean by that is it's going to be outward looking to the local population, as well as just inward looking, talking to the Jewish community. We're very proud that the Jewish community here has lots of local friends in the Emirati community. And actually at our events, it's very often that you'll see someone dressed in the kandora, in the local Emirati dress. And we're very proud that it's an outward looking community as well. So this is a little bit of what the space looks like. And I'm showing you the space. It's obviously very nice, but the reason that I'm showing it you is to highlight the importance of a physical space for the Jewish community here. Services at the moment will often meet in hotels or other rented places. So it is a really big deal for the community that there is a permanent place that the Jewish community can call home. And that's why this center is such a big deal. In terms of our regular programming, we're going to be offering cultural events alongside Jewish festivals. This was our first big event that we did on Hanukkah. We had 60 people in the building, which was amazing. We're going to be doing language classes, Hebrew and Arabic, as well as other social and cultural learning events. This is the view from our main programming room, and that gives you a sense of Dubai and where the center is situated. And I'm just sharing with you here some of the flyers for our programming, just so you can see a little bit of what we're up to. This was a speaker event we held with Rabbi David Staff, who came from Israel last month. And this Moreshet program is key to the community's development. And this is going to be an after-school club that we're starting in the center. And this is something that community members have identified as a real important need for the future growth of the community, is opportunities for young children. And often it's a barrier to remaining in the community is for families who are here and their children age out of programming that is available to them. And so we want to provide programming to young people that enables them to have some form of formal Jewish education. So there is real cause for optimism for Jewish life here in the UAE. All the conditions for vibrant Jewish life are met. The community feels very safe and secure. The government looks after people well. Generally, the UAE is a very safe place to be, and it's economically and politically stable. But some of the challenges are around communal infrastructure, funding, balancing the interests of sort of the global focus of the community with the local people who are there, as well as professional capacity. And as I mentioned before, it's an expat community. Everyone who is here in the UAE because they're working. So no one has that much time to volunteer. And just to bring it round to the importance of Entwine being involved in the community here, and this is where Entwine is really able to add real value. It's not an obvious place where JDC should be working. There aren't people who are hungry in the community here. It's a very affluent community, relatively speaking. But where it is lacking is in terms of the professional capacity. And Entwine, in offering a Jewish service corps placement, is really able both to meet my needs as an emerging Jewish community professional and someone who has time to give and wants to serve somewhere in the world, with adding real value to the community where the community needs it. Now, just to end, I'm going to talk briefly about this picture, which was taken during the shooting of the Hanukkah campaign. A great miracle happened here. And I'm going to put the link to the video that focused on the UAE community in the chat, so everyone can watch that if you'd like to learn a little more about Entwine in the community. And yeah, I know we're at time, so probably no time for questions. But thank you everyone for the opportunity to share a little bit about my work here with you today.
Thank you, Jake and Jeanette. As you can see, this is a fascinating place where there's a lot of potential. The fact that it's a young and expat community is completely different from what we're used to. And we look forward to hearing more about the growth and development of what's going on there. I I'm so sorry that we're out of time. I did want to allow a moment of reflection from Ale to wrap up because there's so much to be said. And we will be focusing more on the Jews of this region in particular, by the way, around these communities, the smaller communities in this region as time goes on. So hold tight. We'll be back to you with more. And yes, you can participate in the Shabbat service. If Jake will be in touch with you, Susie, and anybody else who wants to know. It's great. 7 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. Ale, to you with apologies.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And Susie, I loved your question. I think it's a great question. Yes, we should try and send the link so that people can participate if they want to. I want to say a very, very big thank you to Betsy, Eva, Jeanette, Terry, Jake, Sam, Adil. Gracias, merci mucho. And really, just a couple of thoughts from the conversation. I picked up on two things that we were discussing and how this is emblematic of what we do, of the work that we do, and it's the myriad of realities that really represent the work that we do throughout the regions, and especially in Africa and Asia, including Australia, of course. And our work should not only be measured by the numbers of members engaged, but it should also be measured by the trust that our partners deposit on us, and the role that JDC plays and has historically played in different regions. And Terry, you said something that I felt was lovely when you were talking about Turkey. It connects us to the past. It connects us to the present, and that's what JDC does. JDC is there to help. We're saving Jewish life, or building Jewish life, and we're more than anything celebrating Jewish life. So I'm really excited. This was really fantastic to be able to hear about the different communities, the different regions where we work, and how we engage with the local communities, and as well reflecting on the relationship and how we partner with RD and with Entwine, and how we really put into practice this work. And thank you all for making this possible, and I'm excited that we're able to be there and really to be a part of this present. So thank you all very, very much.
To the future. Thank you all very much for joining us. There'll be more excitement coming out of the Asia Africa Committee, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, please stay healthy. Meeting adjourned.